Peter Schmidt also works with Stericyle. Peter is 100% assigned to North Memorial, so he's at Robbinsdale, at Maple Grove Hospital. He kind of goes around the whole system. I sort of manage other things around the U.S. in terms of systems, but I also do some training for North Memorial. So this is, I think you got a hold of us and said you needed to do some extra training, and you as an organization, you're piggybacked into North Memorial's contract. Mm-hmm. So we have, you get favorable rates for disposal and waste streams and things like that. So, rather than spending hundreds of hours going over through all the regulations, we kind of did this little cheat sheet for you. So who was here a few years ago, maybe in 2012 when I think we did an inset session here in service. I know you said you were.
I was here.
Were you here? Okay, good. Here. So what we're here for is to help educate you on an annual basis or whenever you need training on what is hazardous waste, what is pharmaceutical hazardous waste, and how you manage those. So the agencies, the federal government, the state government, and the county all have environmental inspectors, environmental regulatory areas, and they have regulations that you have to adhere to. And part of it is you've seen, the black containers that are we just took a tour. They're in they're in your ORs, right? Mm-hmm. They're in your, I don't remember if they're in a bedroom or what Peter said.
So until your room.
Okay.
Free out.
So we put those containers in the areas where you want to collect pharmaceutical waste that's not administered or left over. It's actually a waste. If you empty a container, empty a vial, empty a syringe, and there's no medical waste left in it, or no medicine left in it, it's not a waste. That can be thrown in the garbage. So we're really just kind of collect things that are unused. Now, I don't know all your internal policies and procedures. You probably have procedures on dealing with any kind of controlled substance left over, mm-hmm. right? So what would that be? Tell me what that is.
Well, right now what we do is the narcotics go in the sewer.
In the where?
In the sewer.
Okay, all right, yes, okay. And that is the correct procedure for it. So that's why I had to ask, because mm-hmm. controlled substances are pharmaceuticals, but it's a waste stream we can't manage.
I have a question on that. I
Yep.
hear that might be changing though, coming in June.
I'm not sure. From
maybe changing, yes, probably not June. June
yeah.
Probably a little soon.
So there's multiple agencies looking into controlled substances waste.
Okay.
Not from a federal level and at a state level, it's still pretty complicated. And it comes down to the management of leftover controlled substances is really a DAA area. It's not an EPA area. So EPA tells us, and the state of Minnesota says, we don't want it down the drain. But you as a provider of services, just like the hospitals, have no other option. You don't really have containers you can put these in. So the environmental agencies are saying we don't want it in the sewers or down the drain, but the DEA, honestly, their priority is diversion control, not waste management. In fact, I've done trainings with DEA where we brought them into sessions and asked them, what do you recommend to hospitals and clinics and surgery centers to do with controlled substance waste? And their response was, what do you mean controlled substance waste? Because they had no idea that there was actually leftover controlled substance medication. They only get brought into a situation when there's a diversion issue. So this was all new to them. So at the federal level, you've got DEA and EPA kind of battling it out as who's in charge. Right now, we have no other options for you. We're not allowed, our trucks, Peter, myself, we're not DEA registrants that we can take your controlled substance waste. So our sharps containers, the red bag containers of medical waste, the black pharmaceutical waste containers, they can't have any controlled substances because we would be
transporting them or something?
We would be transporting them and managing them, and mm-hmm. we're not allowed to. We're not licensed to do that. So we have to really ask you, like, how do you manage them? And we say that's the appropriate way at this point. Is there a better option? Yeah, we'd probably like to have a better option. But the agencies haven't allowed that yet. So you guys are in a North Memorial facility. And when this was opened, there was sort of a struggle of how do we manage non-North Memorial entities that are in their building. So bottom line, what happened probably about 4 years ago or 5 years ago, when did this open? 2011?
8
years
Eight.
ago.
Oh my God. All right. Well, it was after the fact. What happened is this building, not the hospital proper, but ACC MOB, is managed as one generator of hazardous waste. So every entity in here, other than Park Nicollet, because they chose to do it on their own, is basically managed under one number. And then, so the waste streams actually go downstairs into a room. At the end of the day, or at the end of the week or month,
Tuesday, Thursday normally.
Tuesday, Thursday, when we pick up waste from there, and this is not medical waste, this is pharmaceutical and hazardous waste, which include light bulbs and batteries and things like that. This building is the generator, and North Memorial Healthcare is the generator. So you guys are, what it's done is relieved you as an entity. You don't have the burden of having to track that number, your volumes and stuff. Do you pay for it? Yeah, they assign you money for it. North Memorial does, but you're getting actually a pretty good deal.
And that's a flat rate, correct? It's not by weight?
I don't even know how it's allocated. I think it's allocated based on the square footage,
Okay.
like how much space you rent. So that's sort of the agency side of, you are regulated by Hennepin County, the state of Minnesota, and the federal government. And part of this is you need to train people on how to manage their waste streams. So pharmaceutical and hazardous waste is what this training is about. I do work for Stericyle, but I'm not in the medical waste area. I don't really train on sharps, and I think I asked you, like, how do you train on that? And you said you have an annual process of bloodborne pathogens, what are infectious wastes? What do we do with sharps? Now, obviously, we have our containers in there, and we manage it that way, but that is a whole other plant of ours. That waste stream goes to a St. Paul plant, whereas the pharmaceutical and hazardous waste goes to Blaine and gets shipped to Texas and incinerated. So it's two different entities. We can't, even legally, we can't put the waste on the same truck. So you may see a Stericyle truck show up, a white one, that picks up your medical waste, and then you see a black one, or Peter handles the pharmaceutical and hazardous waste. So we have two different entities coming here to get different waste streams, because it all goes to different locations. So what I've handed out here, this is sort of it's a cheat sheet of the regulations and why we're doing what we're doing. And really, most of the pharmaceutical waste that you have, we manage as one color. There's actually a lot of different categories of pharmaceutical waste. And bottom line, we sort of manage all yours the same way, because it's just easier that way. Do you handle any nicotine or coumadin? Unlikely? Okay. Which is good, because that's another area that has its own regulations. And that waste stream causes a lot of issues in terms of the generator and how to segregate that. So that's kind of why I asked that. So going through this is, if you remember Samantha, who used to be with us? Peter has taken over for Samantha's position. So you've been doing this since December?
4 months?
So you may see him more often. I'm here occasionally. I don't come here too often, unless I'm asked to come.
And Jonathan.
Jonathan is one of our technicians too. So pharmaceutical waste, what you want to collect in those black containers is any unused medication. If a vial is empty, a syringe is empty, the IV is fully drained, it's garbage. If there's something left over, now I don't know if you have anything that would be left over in an IV. What would you have that would be a medicine in an IV?
Epinephrine.
Epinephrine? Okay, so if you have leftover epinephrine in the bag, basically grab the whole administrative set, clamp it up, put it in the black container. You don't have to pour it out, you don't have to try to drain it and put it into a different container. We'll take all of it, that whole container is incinerated once it's full.
And that goes into the black box?
The black container,
Big container.
yes. I don't think, it's not a box, it's a plastic, yeah. And,
Is
yes.
there a percentage though with the epinephrine that's hazardous?
No,
Or
if it's,
is it all, I mean, if it's really diluted?
not really.
Okay.
It's because it's hard to prove what exactly that concentration is at any given time. It's probably easier just to manage it as a waste, if leftover. If you look at the IV bag and it's half done and there's half left over, that's an obvious that we want to just grab that and collect that. If it's fully drained, is there still a trickle or a drop in there? Probably. But from the agency's perspective, that's been used according to its intended purpose. It's trash. The same would be in a vial. You probably have a lot of lidocaine use, right? Do you use, and I don't know what size vials you use. Do you use multi-dose? Different sizes. Okay. Look,
30.
is there sometimes you're left with a vial with some lidocaine left in it?
Yes.
What do you do with that?
We were told if it's just lidocaine and no epi in it, we can dump it in the garbage. So we usually dump it on a towel and then it'll evaporate in the garbage.
Okay, I don't remember, but I would say we probably would have trained you that we want to collect those vials as pharmaceutical waste in the black containers.
All we
Okay.
And that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
So any of them, whether or not they contain epi, they should go in there.
So what about the big 3,000 bags of saline that we use for knee scopes?
Is saline a medicine?
It's irrigation.
And it's irrigation, not a medicine.
So
If it
only
doesn't
if we're
have-
adding
If
epi
it
to the
doesn't have an
bag.
NDC number,
The
it's
epi
not a
in it.
medication.
But if there's epi in that irrigation, that's okay to,
With the whole,
Is it epi infused into the bag?
just like 3 cc's in a bag?
Freestanding? It's in like a tray?
No, it's in a bag.
We add it to a bag.
Add it to a bag of
Okay.
saline.
so we may put 3 cc's of 1 to 1,000 epi in a bag of 3,000 saline. And you're saying, it sounds like you're saying that if you're done, when the case is over, if you have half of that bag full still, that entire bag should go into that
Well, now that
black
we're talking
container.
about OR procedures, it's a complicated area for
Okay.
how do you want to manage that. In the agency's perspective, you've now created, when you add epinephrine to a saline, you've created all medicine.
Yeah.
So if I were, you have a choice to make. And we haven't gone through all your list of your drugs to tell you which ones go to which color, because there actually is a non-hazardous pharmaceutical waste and a hazardous site. You are managing everything as hazardous because it's easier that way. And your volumes aren't significant enough, like a hospital, to financially segregate these. And when we go to other North Memorial clinics, not just surgery centers, but other North Memorial clinics, and even across the country at clinics, we manage most things as just black. Because the extra training to do on which ones are not black and which ones are still have to be incinerated, it's very complicated. You have to actually have your formulary and go through each one. That is not something that you guys subscribe to. So you have a choice to make on that. If you have leftover epi in a bag, I probably would manage it as a hazardous. How often does that happen?
Weekly.
So how many bags would that be? Like,
A lot.
There's only a
Well,
couple doctors that
right.
have epi in for, so.
It's those shoulders, you know, those.
yeah,
how
it's
they
usually
use.
an orthopedic type. Yep. And now, independently, we can probably talk about this separately and decide on that particular waste stream, maybe there's a better way. I don't know if I want to train you all on that, because I really need to discuss that in a little
Okay.
more detail. But I know from the agency's perspective, they're going to look at that whole set is it's a medicine, definitely. Plain IV solutions can go down the drain. They're not a medicinal, it's not a medicine, not an NDC. So any kind of other irrigation fluids or maintenance solutions, just, I think I have here, let me pass this out.
Can we get 3 of the other, or first one too? 3 more.
Oh, yeah, okay, the back cap. There's probably more on that.
Like a king with
So Darrell, it sounds like you're telling us though, as far as medication bottles, and I'm thinking back to the OR again.
Yep.
You have a bottle of plain lidocaine and you have used a portion of that bottle that it should go in the black box.
Yes. Yep.
Whatever's left.
I'm even coming here today, my assumption working in, what I knew we trained you back in 2012, is yet all medication waste, except for controlled substances, was being managed in the black. And lidocaine left in a vial would be one of those examples.
The latest we had heard was to pour it into the black box.
No,
As it was
no.
dispensed, that we had to pay by weight.
So that we weren't supposed to have the bottles in there, we were supposed to just dump it into the black box.
No, that is, we don't want you dumping it in the black box.
So everything in the black box should be labeled?
Doesn't need to be,
Or
no,
just in
no. The black box
container?
is any pharmaceutical waste. We would prefer that it's in a container. Like if it's in a vial, it's got a septum and it doesn't leak, throw it right in there. An IV bag, IV set that has medication waste stuff in it, clamp it, wrap it around, put it in that container. Once that waste container gets moved downstairs, we seal it up and it's shipped out as incineration. Nobody ever goes in there. There's no one who goes in there and separates things out.
So what's happening in the OR though is we'll open a bottle of medication and pour it onto the sterile field.
Okay, that's a good.
And they
example.
have some left that then they're not going to use. What are we doing with that?
Once it's exposed to the environment, it's basically sewer
Okay.
waste. So if it's in a tray with instruments,
Mm-hmm.
that is exposed. Do you have Neptunes?
Doorknob, right,
Or
same.
Not
hoppers?
for
or-
every case though.
Okay, but that is, honestly, that is medication waste that is used to be used in that method.
Okay.
It's exposed to the environment. It's not something you need to walk over and try to put in a bottle and then put the bottle away.
Okay.
If it's already in a bag and it's infused with the medication waste and it's still half full or you have some in there, that would be a medication waste that we collect because it's unused. Whereas if it's in a tray, that's being used.
So the same would go for irrigation fluids that we've added an antibiotic to, and
Yeah.
that has been poured onto the sterile field.
Antibiotic, if it's exposed, it's
Garbage.
sewered.
Okay, good.
Yes. If it's antibiotic left in an IV bag, that would be something we would collect.
Okay.
Can I ask about what's the
Yeah.
difference if it's exposed or not versus if the medication's
Well,
exposed, you can
well,
sewer it out?
in our experience working with multiple ORs across the country, that the hassle factor of trying to put it back into a container that gets put into a container, a black one like we have, and what happens in there, then it's a mixture in the bottom of the container. And then we bump into what's called Department of Transportation rules. We can't ship loose liquids in containers. So then we have to come back to you and saying, stop doing that, because we can't take it unless it's all contained. And then you'd have to put solidifier in, and it's just a hassle.
It's helpful to know.
Yeah, so we're bumping into multiple regulations that we have to comply with. Once it leaves your, yeah, and I've had this discussion with ORs across the country going like, well, we have a doctor in Green Bay doing shoulder surgeries, and he liked to order, or he or she, I don't remember what, but they like to order 8 bags or something, 3,000 cc bags of what do you call it, saline with something in it. And they go like, what a waste, at the end of the day, we have to throw half of those away. And we're going, well, that's up to you. But we're just telling you what the regulations do, and we're trying to make it easy for you. So on this next handout I gave you, on kind of on the bottom here, we gave you some kind of regular maintenance solutions. Lactated ringers, dextrose, electrolytes. By and large, those are not pharmaceuticals. So none of the rules I'm talking about apply to any of those. You shouldn't be throwing saline bags into any of the pharmaceutical waste containers. That's not a pharmaceutical waste. Peter and I are in Robbinsdale, Memorial Medical Center, and we are constantly on the hunt of trying to remind people, because sometimes it's just like, well, simpler is easier. Let's just throw the bag in there. I'm not even going to look and see if it's a pharmaceutical waste, but it's an IV hanging, and they don't just discern whether it's pharmaceutical or saline and just throw it in the pharmaceutical waste container. Yes, they pay more for that, but we say don't do that. Manage maintenance solutions down the drain, and then you've got garbage. So I've also listed on here some of the examples, and you may or may not have all these. I don't go into OR. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a nurse. I don't administer medications, but these are some of the things that we would describe as examples of pharmaceutical waste. And remember, we want to collect things that are unused. If you use the whole syringe, you draw everything out of the vial that you can get out of the vial, it's garbage. Okay? as you go through any of these documents, just let me know if there's anything that you have any questions on. Because it's really, I mean, this is pretty much a free-forming training session. And I could go into hundreds of examples of different options of managing this stuff. In reality, we try to make it as simple as possible as we can, even though the regulations are very complicated. When we implement a pharmaceutical program at a hospital, we actually look at every drug that they have in that hospital, in their inventory, in their formulary. And we code each one on what it should go into the black or blue containers. For clinics or surgery centers, you basically manage everything as black. It's just so much easier. And the cost isn't that much different, actually.
Can you talk about hand sanitizer?
Sure. Hand sanitizers. I don't know what brand you use. Do you use the same brand as the rest of the building?
Is it Quick Care?
Yeah.
Quick Care?
Ecolab, is it a foam or the?
Yeah.
All right, so.
Yeah, we have both.
And hazardous waste regulations came out in the 70s. What they were written for was to, for industry, and your industry is just like chemical plants. Just your industry is regulated by these same regulations. These regulations were written to minimize waste that's going into landfills and into dumps and things like that. So if you look at a hand sanitizer, I know you have a safety data sheet on it, right? Do you know that? And what is one of the components of it?
Alcohol.
And okay, so the percent of alcohol is usually like 62 or 70%, somewhere in there? All right, so from the federal government's perspective, and Hennepin County and the state, if there's something left in that hand sanitizer, they would say that that is a flammable hazardous waste because you could light it. It would, if you had a match or an ignition source, that would flash and it would explode or catch fire. So the government says that hand sanitizer, unused or not fully emptied, is a flammable hazardous waste, and you have to collect it into a separate container. You shouldn't have too many of those, right? You should use them until they're empty. If they're expired and have some left, that's the one we probably want to collect.
But if they're empty, they go in the garbage?
Yes. So the rule on that, just like the bottles, use until empty. When it's empty, it's garbage. So there's all kinds of regulations under the hazardous waste regulations that say that's a flammable hazardous substance. And then there's certain things that are corrosive, like they have a very high or very low pH. You don't really have any of those. A couple don't. There's a few other things.
So we have a separate container here,
Yeah, for
specific
aerosols
just
and-
for aerosols.
Yes.
Do we only have one of
I
those?
think you only
containers?
have one container.
And that's out in PACU, right,
I don't know
Julie?
where it is.
Soil and utility room, I believe.
You probably only need one in your whole
Neat.
department, your whole suite.
Okay.
Sorry, what's the color of it?
Black.
It'd be black,
Yeah.
but it would be listed as aerosols only.
Oh.
That's what I
Where is
thought.
it? In our soil utility room? Oh, that's that thing, okay.
Probably would be a good idea to know where that is.
Yeah.
You want to check?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, all right. So I think it's in your soil utility room. We were in there, I probably should have found it.
Yeah.
Sitting on the floor.
In this first handout, you have some listings of where you have the containers, right? The number of, and we kind of did a quick walk. In the ORs, you have them. I think they're the large ones, right?
I think there's an 8-gallon.
8 gallon, so it's a larger one and a little dolly, right? Moves around. How often are those filled, do you know?
I don't. They switch, I believe you switch them out yourself.
Okay.
They're in the back facility room.
So your staff actually move them out, and then when we see them in the soil utility room, we take them from there?
And something to know too on that is now that everybody is going to be trained on that all medications are going in there, in their bottles, those are going to get filled up much more quickly.
Yep.
Okay. Probably about 4 years ago, I did an analysis of this whole MOB ACC building, and because North Memorial was asking me how much waste is coming out of ASC, your unit, compared to the rest of the building. By and large, you're probably about 80 to 90% of the pharmaceutical waste is coming out of your unit. I do not know whether that's what they charge you, because I have nothing to do with what North Memorial asks for your reimbursement for what they're running for you. That's really on the business side. We know we pick it up, and we charge North Memorial as an entity for this whole building. Because we have data. We know what this whole building generates. What we don't know is, I can't tell you in that room downstairs whether it's your waste or another clinic's waste, because it could arrive there on a weekend and we would have no idea where it came from. So that's sort of more on the business side of how that's managed. If you generated more, probably it's not going to change a whole lot what your annual cost of this whole building is. But I think we'll be better at it. We'll be better at managing the things the right way. One more, any more questions on what I handed out? Because I have a little flow chart here. This is kind of like the cheat sheet. And I know you've seen these. I don't think this changed. I looked at this today and I didn't change it. A couple over here. And I know looking around this morning, I saw a couple of these like laminated and put up on the walls. It's really just a cheat sheet of reviewing the same material I just covered with you. Why we want to put sharps in the sharps container, infectious waste in the infectious waste container, pharmaceutical waste in the pharmaceutical waste containers, controlled substances down the drain. And then plain IV solutions or electrolytes, that's all can be sewer. Did you get one?
Oh, so this might be where people were talking about discharging into a gauze or something.
That would be the something in a syringe,
Yeah.
which shouldn't happen too often. Does it? Yeah, pharmaceuticals
Usually
left in
just,
syringe.
it's usually controlled substance.
Okay,
It
which
is left
we want that down the drain.
Yep.
That is a difficult thing in a hospital as well, because sometimes they have something left in a syringe with a needle, and it's like, well, is it a medical waste or is it a hazardous waste? And then we have to say, well, you have to tell us. And then they ask, well, what do you think? And it's back to that debate. So that's why this one in here is saying, if you have something left in a syringe, that's a lidocaine. Discharge into a gauze, put the gauze into a pharmaceutical waste container, put the sharp in a sharps container. Because at the end of the day, the process of treatment of those two waste streams is totally different. And we are under permits and licenses in terms of what we can put on trucks and how we have to treat waste. So pharmaceutical waste gets incinerated in Texas, Port Arthur, Texas. There's only 6 places in the country that can incinerate hazardous pharmaceutical waste, or that we use anyway. And one of them is in Texas, so we send a lot of stuff there. Sharps and medical waste is treated at an autoclave plant in St. Paul, so it doesn't go anywhere near as far. And the St. Paul plant can't treat chemical waste. The St. Paul plant, if you know autoclaving, is basically like steam cleaning. And at the end of the day, steam cleaning, what it does is create steam, and you have an effluent that goes down the drain, right, from the plant. So if you put pharmaceutical waste in there, the steam doesn't do anything to it. It's just pharmaceutical waste going into the river. So we take pharmaceutical waste out of that, put it into an incinerator where it's burned, and then it's never seen again.
So if it's in a syringe, basically it just has to be, either we could cap it or something like that, or put it in the gauze.
You don't want
If
to.
you
You just can't have anything
except for
loose
controlled
and-
substances, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I won't say it doesn't happen. We frown on trying to move containers that are sloshing around, because then we get in trouble on the transport side. If
I
we-
will have to say, Samantha, the reason why they're asking is when I confirmed with Samantha, she said that we could dump it into the black boxes. So that's why there's probably some questions here.
Okay.
Is when I had asked her, she said, yeah, you can dump it in.
What, do you know what she was referring to specifically? What medication?
Lidocaine that we use a lot of. Empty the bottles out into the black boxes and throw the bottle away.
I would encourage you not to even go through that step. Just put whatever's lidocaine left in a vial, put it right into the black container.
Okay.
Because we try to minimize what's going around and sloshing around in those containers. So I would like to improve on that if we can.
And I think the reason it went to that in the first place was because those of us who have been trained on this before have been told it's like 50 times more expensive to get rid of
No.
what's in the black box than it is what's in the regular garbage.
Not, it's not that, the difference today isn't that different.
Okay.
We know there's going to be some extra weight in there, but you're actually not charged per weight anyway.
Okay.
As a tenant of this building, you get, I know you get a great deal.
Okay.
That honestly, you're getting subsidized by a lot of the other clinics in here.
Okay.
So,
And we love them for that.
yeah. In reality, there's no way unless someone writes down everything that goes in that container and it gets moved downstairs. When our truck shows up or Peter is trying to pack things, how is he going to know? Well, that one box came from that clinic. This one came from here. We'll have no idea because things move down there in the middle of the night. You know, at the hospital, they have their own room for this. We know what's theirs, and it's easier to do. In this kind of building, it's harder to do. So as a business entity, that's how North Memorial chose to kind of divvy up the costs. You do pay, like for example, when any of these bulbs and batteries, like fluorescent lights, if you have any. I know you have them in your. So when someone replaces your fluorescent lights in your suite, those bulbs go downstairs. They go in with all the other bulbs in this whole complex. And then you're paying a % based on your square footage to deal with that because there is a recycling process for light bulbs. They're not meant to be put in the garbage. No, this isn't huge dollars. But the only, I guess, one way of doing it was just dividing out by square footage of what you rent compared to the rest of the building. So this flow chart is kind of just separates out the various waste streams. Pharmaceutical waste is in the middle. You got regular trash, sharps, and we call the aerosol incompatible. And why do we call it that way? Because we're not supposed to mix it with other waste. When we put it on the truck, it has to be in its own little container. So you can't throw aerosols in with the pharmaceutical waste. It's kind of funny because eventually they all end up in the same facility and burned anyway. But they have to, by DOT rules, we have to separate that out. That's why it's a different category. And then it has, on the blue side, you have all your, what can go down the sanitary sewer or sink.
It might be helpful to note here that we can put like a container, an actual container in there. I know there was.
Other than just the drug?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know there was confusion around that, you know, or do, because here it says, you know, out of the gauze or whatever.
Yeah, the gauze is really just that one time when you have something that's still left in a syringe.
Okay.
But
Otherwise the whole
you do not need
The
to
vial.
do these extra steps.
Okay.
Because I honestly, from our standpoint, from a cost and a handling standpoint, it's not going to change a whole lot. And it's going to save you time. And as a cost for this whole building, it's really irrelevant. It's just a little more that's going to come from there. I understand the epi in a bag because that's a lot of fluid, and that's one of those. I don't know what you want to do. I mean, that's maybe a side discussion on if you have this. In reality, what has happened is most of the healthcare providers, I'm talking about the doctors, this isn't even on their radar. You know, they just order stuff because they're used to ordering it, and you know, they're not in charge of handling the waste at the end of the day. And so healthcare hospitals are just kind of like, well, you know, this doctor likes to have all this stuff sitting there, and now we're throwing it all away. That's why these regulations were written the way they were. They incentivized generators of waste to find an alternative. Is this way too hard?
Very helpful.
It is very helpful. It's just you got us at the post-lunch time. So.
Yeah, you guys are all nappy.
In the
So,
sunshine.
You know, we've connected, and you've got our emails,
Yeah.
and you know, he's coming through. If you ask him, we're not that far away. So, you know, we walk through and you ask some questions or shoot us an email, we'll respond. He's 100% working for North Memorial. I'm a kind of a part-time person for North. I do carry a contractor badge and stuff. So this gets us into all the doors. The entities like MOB, ACC are kind of hard to kind of get organized because you have a lot of different entities in here do different things. We have an example where I think we have its Multicare Associates is in one of their buildings.
Oh, in Roseville, yeah.
Yeah, and so they're like partnering up. I think the Blaine Urgency Center has Multicare nurses, and they had never heard of pharmaceutical waste. I was like, what do you mean? How do you not know this? So, and they're now in a North Memorial building, and North Memorial wants to follow the regulations. So we end up having to explain to them, this other entity, like this is how it happens. And they don't do it in Roseville, but now in Blaine they have to.
Sure.
What's the best way to contact you? For
I would go
further
through
questions?
Barb, and again, Peter, I think you have his email on.
I do.
He even has a,
Stericyle at northmemorial.com.
yeah.
Yep, I have it.
So as an entity, you guys have been grandfathered into the agreement of North Memorial. So what you're paid for disposal and training and stuff is all the same. That if North Memorial wanted me to go do training for them, which I do for them anyway, because they pay for that, we do get the same rates as what they get. My background is environmental engineering and management, so I do this for hospital systems around the country. I happen to live here, and I do a lot with Peter on North Memorial, but this isn't the only one I do. And I was with Sam when we did this a few years ago. I know what you're saying when you mention Sam, because in some cases we've run into kind of the history of doing things at North where we're trying to improve. So we've kind of had to fight those battles when we reach them. Like just change a different practice so that we really don't want to be pouring stuff into our containers. That just creates another mess that we have to deal with.
Perfect.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, well, thank you for coming.